Well, hello, everybody. Jennifer and I are back with another episode of Athena Heard. And this morning we're joined by Rob Thompson and Gilly Coston. Our topic for today is one that seems to have been coming up in our conversations quite a lot recently, and it's the topic of transition. And what we mean by transition is the psychological process that people go through when change is imposed upon them or they find themselves in a shifting situation. And so it recognizes that change is something that is done to us, and transition is our process of coming to terms with that shift in circumstances. And Jennifer and I, when we've been talking about this, have noticed a parallel here for the lives of horses as well, in terms of how horses get moved around. They come from one place, they have to adjust to, they don't really know whether they're going to settle in, they don't really know if they're going to make relationships there, and they ultimately find a way to settle in to whatever new home that their human carers have moved them to. So there are some real parallels actually between what we experience as human beings and what happens for our animals. And of course, this also ties in with the equine facilitated work, where we are helping people on those journeys of change and helping people to experience actually what they need to go through to move through and move forward through these periods of transition. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We've got a lovely conversation lined up for this morning. And I'd just like to reach out and introduce Rob Thompson.
Good morning, Graham. Good morning, everyone. Rob Thompson, pleased to be here today. So a bit about me. I currently work at the Royal Naval Leadership Academy. I've been there for some time now. At the Royal Naval Leadership Academy, I'm a coaching advisor. I'm responsible for all the delivery of all the coaching training and the designing of. Prior to that, been in the Royal Navy, served for 30 years in the Royal Navy. Did all the good stuff from cocktail parties in Rio de Janeiro to, boots on the ground patrols in Afghanistan through to where I am today, deep in leadership and coaching and mentoring training.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. Plenty of change in that one, I can see. So we'll have to just limit you to a couple of topics this morning. Okay. Brilliant, Rob. Thank you. Gilly.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I have spent around 30 years, I can't believe it's really that long, in the really fast-paced and ever-evolving, fiercely competitive telecoms industry. I've loved working with many, many amazing people, and I decided to, after that time, sort of change career at the end of 2019. So started my new company, the Horsepower Partnership, in 2020. And that's focused around consulting and coaching. I think what's interesting for today for me is it took me 5 years of turmoil and training myself ready for my new career, and finally finding the time and space to listen to me. And it's been about daring to discover how to help others in order to help myself, and going from fierce in a fierce industry to finding how to be gentle and learning. I think I'm on that journey to unflinchingly and consistently being a source of kindness and compassion and gentleness.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julie. I think one thing that came out from me there, just from what you were saying, was actually that period of time in the middle, that period of transition where you were trying to say farewell to the old world, but not quite yet in the new world. And that's a really important part that sort of sits in on an understanding of the psychological process of transition. So I can't wait to explore that. Thank you. And Jennifer, so you have some stories to share with us this morning as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to be in this space with you all. And Graham, I think you introduced my topic really well at the beginning. I always go back to the horses. I see so many parallels with the horses in a lot of the work that we do. And as you know, Athena Heard it. We're a training centre primarily, but we do a lot of work. We do a lot of work we've started to do work with vulnerable adults, you know, and we've been putting in more and more applications to expand on the funded work that we do to facilitate shifting circumstances for the people. But ultimately, we wouldn't be able to do that without having the space that we've created. So ultimately, you know, for me, the importance has always been starting with the health and the well-being of the horses, so that we can bring the people into a safe environment to support them through their shifting circumstances. So thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, and there's something really special there about actually the animals have been through that period of transition and they have settled. And it's that settled post-transition space that really makes or delivers the benefit for those that come and experience it, I think. So
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so look, what we're going to do is we're going to dip in. We're going to hear some stories and discuss some of our experiences of transition. So I'm going to reach out to Rob first, who's going to tell us a little bit about some of the transitions that he's experienced or he sees people having to experience around the forces.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So when this topic come up, I was very excited to go back and visit what had happened to me in the last 30 years, having, you know, as I said, in the Navy, traveling around. And the biggest transition period, yeah, the biggest one for me was, as I mentioned earlier, I volunteered to do a tour of Afghanistan in 2011. So if I can, I'll just take you back a little bit. Joined the Navy at 16, done all of that stuff. I'd done all the sea time, and I decided a bit of a step change. I'd been promoted, and I went to a role of what we call career management. So I was one of the guys who would allocate jobs around the Navy for all the people within my trade specification. I had about 300 people on the books at the time, and I was settled into that job. And we had a responsibility to, with everything going on in Afghanistan, to get one person out of those 300 to volunteer for the role. And I'll talk a little bit more about the role in a bit. So I sat there merrily for a year, 18 months, just assigning people off to different parts of the country, to jobs hopefully that would be good for their careers, and satisfy all the balances, the work-life balances which come with that. And then every 6 months, or maybe every 8 to 9 months, I would have to have the conversation with somebody, mostly not a volunteer, and ask them if they would be willing to go and serve in Afghanistan. Now, to put it into context, we're a bunch of caterers. So we're either cooking food or serving food. And whilst in the military, I can say hand on heart that we didn't really do a lot of military stuff in what we term the green space. So the guys and girls in the field doing all of that stuff. We are, the closest we get in the Navy is 12 miles off the coast where all the stuff's going on. We'll just sit there nicely watching it happen from afar. So it was that conversation, and it got me thinking a lot, because it was a tough conversation. It was a big ask. It was to do something different. And completely out of the comfort zone. So as we come round, as time ticked on, I sort of knew that that's what I would do. And I think that was an unconscious decision at the time, because, you know, being the career manager, you're in the luxurious position that you have every job available to us, available to you, and be able to assign yourself to. Not really have that many glamorous jobs, but we certainly have some non-glamorous jobs also. So I come round and I made the leap. And I suppose this is where we get to start talking about the transition piece, because that's where it started for me, the unconscious bit of knowing I was going to do it. And then I committed to it. So I put my name down to go and do it. And this is, as I think back, and I was thinking about this morning, this is the transition piece. Because whilst it was all the way in the future, and I mean months now, you know, the conversations, I was openly talking to people that I was going to go and do the role in Afghanistan.
Scary, huh?
Scary, but I suppose, yeah, the point Yeah, it wasn't at this point, I don't think. It was exciting still. It was, lots of pats on the back, lots of, oh, well done, Rob, you could have gone anywhere, but you chose to go and do this job. So there's a bit of ego stroking, I suppose, there as well. But then time ticked on. Very, very quickly to start the training. Now, just a quick bit about the role. So it was to join the military stabilization support team. And what that is one individual, so you're an augmentee and you get dropped into a fighting company of soldiers. You're on your own, there's nobody else with you who you train with, and then you just get dropped in with this fighting company and you go around and do all the stuff. And effectively my role within the company was to make friends with the locals, help building projects, roads, schools, repair lots of damage. I used to walk around with a backpack full of money, just to paying for stuff. That was the role. So to step back, there was 6 months training for that over the winter to go for a summer tour in Afghanistan. So I arrived in the training, and I don't mind saying it, I was overweight, I was unfit, I was 37, surrounded by these young fighting men, these soldiers, men and women. So I struggled with the training. That's when the reality hit. That's when I decided I need support. I need some help here, which I got. The guys and girls, the military, I'm proud to say, is good at that. They rally around and they help. So I got through the training. There was lots of weapons training, lots of that stuff, to then get to Afghanistan. And being in the Royal Navy, there is a little tongue-in-cheek competition between the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines. Whilst the Royal Marines are part of the Royal Navy, they'll never admit it to anybody, although it says it on their details. They'll never admit they're in the Royal Navy. So at the time, there was a company of Royal Marine 4-5 Commando, there was a Gurkha regiment, and there was an army regiment going out on our tour. So all through training, I was like, please, don't put me with the Royal Marines. They'll just absolutely rip me and it'll be terrible. And lucky me, guess who I got? 4-5 Commando, Royal Marines, off you go, Rob. But again, back to it, got into theatre, got with the guys down in our little patrol base. We lived there. There was 14 of us in the patrol base, and back to with transition, the important parts of that support is those guys to say, metaphorically and physically, that my life was in the hands of 27-year-old soldiers. As a 37-year-old senior rate in the Royal Navy, that support was huge, and it was offered, and thankfully we all come back safe. But that sort of brings me to the next part, not wanting to skip over what we did, or skipping over what we did. I was then faced, having gone through that transition and the action-packed 100-mile-an-hour, nervous energy, all of everything you can imagine.
Yeah, cool.
Like that. Yeah. To then having to come back to what was, in my perception, the humdrum normal life of the Royal Navy. All the stuff I'd talked about before I went there, and I really struggled. I genuinely struggled with, and it was, my attitude was all wrong. To take a step back to Afghanistan, I talked a lot about support and the importance of that. But what couples with that, and I know we've talked about, is the resilience, having that resilience to just I don't know, but because I think it's a very personable.
So let me ask you a question, Rob. I mean, it's in terms, you're talking about resilience, and you talked a little bit about support to help you through that transition. I mean, what were if you like, within yourself, what were the resources within you that you found you were able to access, and how did you access those things to get you through?
Yeah, it's so, again, I've given it lots of thought, and it sounds a little glib, but so my whole approach was just go through the door, go through, take that deep breath, just trust in the training, and I think that's something that's missed a lot. Trust in, I've got for want of a better phrase, I've got a little bit about me, and that's not in a shouty way. That's the internal. That's what I keep telling myself, that you know what, you're okay. You will, whatever happens, to a degree. Certainly before I went, when I was on the ground in Afghanistan, it was just the resilience bit was just trust the guys around you, do as you're told. That was that. So how did I access it? Again, no magic. It was a lot of times just a big deep breath, big deep breath, and go, right, let's just see what happens, and be in a state of mind ready to react.
Okay.
I suppose is in that scenario. Coming back to the Navy, the resilience piece there was just it's yeah, you'll be okay. It will calm down. Everything will slow down, and it genuinely. I think it'd take me a long time to explain it. I'd need a lot more intelligent people than I.
I think what I heard you talking about was in that period of time in when you were getting through your service in Afghanistan was essentially a sustained state of hypervigilance, if you like. You know, you're never, the pressure's never off. There's always a little bit of an eye to your back side as well, and having to make sure that somebody's there to hold your back for you as well. And I can only imagine what it must be like to come out of that situation where you've lived in that state of hypervigilance, but not actually remain or no longer be exposed to the threat. Yeah.
And I told you it'd be someone more intelligent than me could explain it. So yeah, it was absolutely that hypervigilance.
That was me.
You know, I have vivid memories of getting back and the colours in this country that we all take for granted. The colour of the grass, the trees, the tarmac, the roads. It was just all like it was dialed, turned up. And then the perception of the slow pace of life, that everything is just going around. Now, you put Afghanistan and England or a city in comparison, and you'd think the city moves faster with the traffic and the people, because there's very little of that in Afghanistan. But you're right, it's the internal piece that.
So, Rob, how did you let go of Afghanistan?
Oh, I don't think you ever do. So it sounds like I'm just labouring a point. Lots of support. I remember my family was so keen to talk about it, and ask me, what do you need from us? And for me, it was very simply, I just need you to be where you are. I don't need, I need to know you're there. To let go, for me, it was a life-changing 6 months.
I can imagine.
So in lots of positive ways, but yeah, I think
that's really. I'm going to sort of pause with us here for the moment and move to Jilly. But I think there's something that's really interesting there, and again, it's something that Jennifer and I talk about quite a lot. Is that people desperately trying to unlearn the stuff that they're carrying with them? But yes, you have to. Even if you're going to move on from it, you have to let go of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Or you have to find a way to live with that experience. The key bit is, though, you're going to move forward. You know, that no one's going to bring back the Rob that did, or that was before Afghanistan.
I suppose acceptance was a big thing. Just accept that it was it, and it's no longer. You know, it's done. So being comfortable and accepting that maybe was part of the letting go process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob.
Okay,
thank you for that. So Jilly, a little bit of transition from a very different world, or perhaps actually in practice not that different.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to Rob, and you know, we've shared part of our journey together and working together now on many things, and I really see Rob's transition and how he helps others, and I think that sort of little bit about me is spot on, you know, and I just sort of, people connect with him, you know, because of, you know, there's a huge credibility and movement towards something important and something new. So thank you for sharing that, Rob. Yeah, I found some of the things Rob talked about there in terms of ready to react or ready to act really resonate. I spent really 30 years in sales roles and senior leadership roles. It was very male environment and there are very few women coming through that world, and it makes you very tough. And I remember a couple of bosses telling me that I needed to harden up, you know. And I thought, I often thought to myself, I'm not really sure I want to, but the environment sort of made me quite fierce, you know, and in some ways I sort of had to become a different version of myself. I had to bring out parts of myself that perhaps I don't enjoy so much. So whilst I absolutely love the adrenaline rush of, you know, sales is really tough. You know, it's sort of, you're only as good as your last number. You know, you could be fired if you didn't do your target, you know, 2 months in a row. You've got to bring in the right people. You've got to develop the right team around you. There's always something. I worked in the Internet of Things, and I developed that within, you know, a blue chip company that just gave me so much latitude, and I had so much support from brilliant men, actually, and they were all, you know, men, and a lot of them are still in my life. They still support me, they still mentor me, they still throw me in at the deep end, but they'll come and one of my amazing bosses comes to the farm that I now live on and joins me with their herd of horses pretty much every week. Fantastic. You know, and whilst that's supporting him and his growth, it's also supporting me and my growth. So I'm really lucky in lots of ways that it was an adrenaline rush. And actually after 30 years of ups, downs, tears, challenges, encouraging other people, constantly on edge, I needed something different. But similar to Rob, you know, when he talks about the transition, I needed to find ways to react differently. And I noticed one of the biggest challenges that I noticed was that to help myself, I noticed just how much I enjoy helping others and focusing on, you know, sort of helping other people move forward. It is such a symbiotic thing. It's such a sort of, you think that you're giving and actually you're embracing the change yourself in a lot of ways.
There's real meaning in helping other people, isn't there?
Yeah. And it's sort of almost I've been criticized a lot in my younger years for, you know, and always connections with animals. I'd be the one bringing in the lame duck, you know, whether it was a person or an animal. So, but now you really embraced that. Maybe one of the key things that I feel very privileged is that I work for a charity alongside my day job, and I've done this for about 5 years. Worked alongside a charity called HERA, and HERA stands for Her Equal Rights and Autonomy, and it's all about empowering women survivors of modern slavery and exploitation to achieve a better life. Wow. Giving them the opportunity to work with business mentors and academia. It's sponsored by Imperial College and Salesforce and many of the corporate banks. Really help and support, and to help them to become financially independent. But a lot of their journey, a good proportion, 80+%, are asylum seekers. So they've been trafficked into the UK, and it's unimaginable. You know, they remain in a state of ready to react. In some ways, the current asylum system, and there's a lot of changes coming, which I hope will be positive. the current system disables them. It means that they have to continually prove, if they're asylum seeking, that they are vulnerable, and it locks them into a sense of vulnerability. Now, these are amazing women that have internal strength like there is no tomorrow. But it doesn't take away from the challenges that they've faced.
It's hard, and it's hard, isn't it? I was just going to say it sounds really hard, because what you want to do is to help people like that through the transition. You want to help them to move forward.
Yes.
But what obviously potentially you're facing is holding that person, or holding those in the middle of their transition, really in the no man's land, whether they're no longer in their old life and they're no longer in their future, to get through the asylum process. Is that fair, Jill?
That's right, and that can take a long time. The current system, it can take a long time. And one of the students that I worked with as a mentor, and now I am responsible for the coaching and training and bringing on mentors, and we'll work with around 40. And if anyone's interested, please get in touch, because we're always looking for really great business mentors. And there'll be, with COVID, it means that actually we can make this bigger, and we can reach many more people. Before, it was mainly people in London now. But you're right, holding this space can last a long time. And so the resiliency has to come from the mentors, and the coaches, and in order to support and hold that space. And I think that's something I've learned in my work with Athena, and with yourself and Jennifer, is a new way to hold the space. And obviously the shared space that we have is around the herd of horses and coaching and encouraging people. So I feel that this is a wonderful space, and great to be finding my gentleness and my compassion and my kindness, and how that can, have a ripple effect in a small way into other people's lives.
So from that's really fantastic, Jilly. And I think, just being able to hold the space. I love that you finish really in that space, just talking about just creating the right space for people. But just thinking back, you've talked about quite a lot of transitions, both your own and for those of the people that you work with through the Hero charity. I mean, from your experience of quite a significant, if you like, taking off of the pressure almost in transition, whilst to a degree it was a choice, what got you through?
I think one of the biggest challenges was I earn a really, really good living, and to give that up, to go from a 6-figure salary and to nothing. So actually, whether you're religious or not, I am. So actually, I prayed about it a lot, and I asked my unconscious and my to give me a picture. I'm very visual as well. Very logical, but very visual. And I asked for a picture, and I had a picture in mind, and it was filled with horses, and it was filled with people moving around in nature. And so in some ways, in a really touching way, sort of that came from inside. It came from within, and it touched me with the rest of the world. I think also there were times where I really needed the support of others, and that's not something that I've been fiercely independent my whole life. And if you ask my family, that is the one thing that they would say, is that I don't need anyone. I am, and my partner's song for me is "I Will Survive." Gloria Gaynor. So actually reaching out for support, and I think Rob touched on this earlier, and Jennifer talked about it in her introduction. Finding that way to reach out to others and to have that support around. And I'm very, very lucky, as I've talked about, to have that. But I also think there is a personal resiliency, and there have been times where the fear has overtaken,
Of course.
and I have been paralyzed by it. And I'm proud of that, because sometimes you have to break down to break through.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in that. And Rob's been there with me on some of that journey, my partner Steve on that journey, and my family. I'm grateful for that. And there's absolutely something to be very proud about that. Perhaps if I could just finish off with one of the things we've been doing since we moved to the farm, and sort of I gave up work just really a year ago. I broke my leg in the middle of all of that, and so that's that for another day. But with COVID, we decided as a team and family that we would bring on some of the Blue Cross ponies. And we brought in April, who was born in the Blue Cross. She was rescued with a large herd, and she was in a constant state of ready to react. And because in the Blue Cross, there's a lot of transition, there's a lot of movement of horses coming in, horses going out, and she just couldn't settle. I'm glad to say that the Blue Cross trusted me to bring her here. And she's now in a herd of 8 horses and growing. And another Blue Cross pony is arriving shortly. And she is one of the gentlest, most settled ponies that we have in the herd. She is amazing. Like Jennifer's hair, she communicates a lot with her feet. So we can come through it, and with the help of others, including our animal friends. It's a wonderful space.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julie. Again, a lovely theme, a lovely shared theme, really build on what Rob was saying about actually to get through the stuff, to move forward. We cannot do it alone. We do need that support, that connection, that support of other people and those around us to essentially to watch our backs through that journey and to help us with the direction. The other thing for me, Julie, that I think I just pick up from what you said was the importance of having a vision. When the going gets tough, if we don't know where we're going, we just get lost. We get battered by the waves and sent with wherever the tide will take us. So yeah, I think having that vision and holding that vision can be really important. So thank you, Julie. So what I'm going to hand over to Jennifer now, who's going to, because as I say, there's some real parallels in these stories in the horse world. We just really want to weave some of these in. So Jennifer, over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Rob and Julie. And it's interesting just hearing what you're both saying. And, for me, as Graham has said, it's those parallels that always brings me back to the horses. And Rob, you talked about that state of hypervigilance. And Julie, I think, the way that you described it was, that adrenaline rush. And it's interesting because, part of the Athena herd journey was to take in horses. And that was very much on the livery side rather than on the rescue side. But each horse that has come to Athena, they've all had their own unique journey. And I think again a lot of the topics that have come up this morning in conversation have been around that support through transition, and that sort of trust in the process. And we talk about that a lot through, particularly, on the equine interaction, on the equine facilitated learning side of the work that we do here. But it's also, I think, to a certain extent, it's also been part of the journey that we've had with the horses. So as Graham said, the particular horse that I'm going to talk about today is a horse called Byron. And it's really difficult when you're talking about somebody else's horse because you want to respect, their story. But obviously, I'm talking about it from my experience and from the journey that I had with, or I'm very fortunate to have with this particular horse. So So yeah, he arrived, and Graham was laughing about such a few days ago, but you know, he arrived on this huge trailer, and his owner had described him as her little pony, when in fact he was actually a sort of 18-hand plus draft horse. So was not really a little pony, but he was his owner's little pony. And he had really, you know, serious, quite severe anxiety challenges. I understand he'd lost his brother when he was very young, in quite a traumatic experience for him. So, you know, handling him when he came off that lorry, we sort of go into almost automatic mode, you know, okay, let's pop him in a stable and then work out what we're going to do and how he seems. But that didn't really go too well for us, because he started thrashing around in the stable to the point that I actually got quite squashed against the wall between him and the wall. So that didn't work quite well for us. So we knew quite quickly we had to get him out. And we got him out to a field. We generally do keep horses, or we've always kept horses separate when they first arrive, just to observe them, really, let them settle into the environment. And I think, again, a topic that I heard as I think, Gilly, as you were talking, was around, you know, sort of that watching your back, that I think it was around the sort of the adrenaline rush, the fear, and you know, and I found that when horses arrive at Athena, that, you know, it's a very unknown environment for them, that particularly what I found very interesting is people consider that a track system is a very good option for a retirement option. But I think the point here is that when the horses maybe lived separate, you know, in a separate paddock, in a separate stable for its entire life, putting them in an environment where actually they're in a herd, they have got, you know, horses all around them at 24/7, you know, they do quite literally have to watch their back. So, you know, I was sort of hearing a lot of the parallels in what you guys have shared with us already today, because I find that actually horses going into an environment that is a herd environment, that is surrounded, let's say, in a way through a support group, might not necessarily be a support group from day one. So again, you know, it's that building of trust and finding your place within the herd. And so for me, that is one of the biggest challenges for horses when they arrive, and that is the reason why we tend to keep them separate for a while, just to really let them settle into the environment before they start to find their place, in the herd. Unfortunately, with Byron, he was so anxious, and he actually had separation anxiety. So trying to keep him separate when he arrived didn't really work very well for us. So again, we knew quite quickly we had to just put him in the herd. The problem for us was that we had very dominant horses in the herd. So what I ended up doing was having to actually take some of the other horses out of the herd so I could put him into the herd for his own safety and for the safety of those other horses. You know, and that was the only way we found we could do it. And I had to actually explain to the owners of those other horses that were in fields why they were in fields when they came in the evening. But you know, it all worked out quite well. You know, and what I didn't know, and sometimes for me, what I've learned over the years is actually it's better not to know the history, because I find that if you don't know the history, you work with what's presented. And I think, again, you know, what was really interesting over the years, and unfortunately we did lose Byron a year or two ago, that he really had let go of the traumas of the old world. He became, you know, over the years, he found his place in the herd. He was supported. We knew his windows of tolerance. We knew when we needed to intervene. We knew if he'd had enough of being in the field, he would stand at the gate and start to weave and tell us that it was time for him to move, you know, to come out of that field. So, you know, again, we really worked with him and his anxieties to keep them as low as we possibly could. We knew that when he was ready to have his breakfast in the morning, he would stand at the gate, and if we didn't respond, he would again start weaving and start getting quite frantic. So we knew he was number one priority most of the time to come in and to have his feed so he could go out and be relaxed again with his friends. So, you know, it's sort of around, I think for me, the emphasis in all of this is that you know, and again, we see the parallels with people, that each journey, you know, is unique, and that has definitely been the case with the horses that have come to Athena herd, that we've really had to try our very best to listen to, you know, to listen to them, to listen to their needs, to try and work in a way that has addressed, you know, the challenges that they face through their transition into, you know, being respected and supported and actually living in a very different environment that they're used to. So yeah, a lot of topics I think that have come through that I think are very relevant for horses and people.
Just really interesting as you were talking, something that came to mind, Jennifer, was a phrase that I used to hear a lot when my horse Ernie was in stables, apart from how bad he was and how naughty he was actually how a lot of people, owners, would talk about their horses and say they don't know how to be a horse. And what was interesting for me about that phrase was the fact that actually in most of those places they never had an opportunity to be a horse. And I think that's what Byron's story so beautifully describes, is how he developed the opportunity or the way of being a horse, learning to be a horse.
Yeah, and actually one thing I was going to share with everybody was we actually, I mean, we designed a set of cards, and the idea of the cards was to, you know, encourage conversations in the space, and that's more so for you know, for people working with the horses as part of their journey. And the card that we actually allocated to Byron was card number 12, Wounded Healer. And if I've got a couple of minutes, I would like to just read.
Please do, yeah.
The message on the card. So it says, you know, that often there are obstacles or situations which delay or distract us from our intended paths. Often these arise for a reason. The Wounded Healer does not in itself signify suffering, but it recognizes that we need to release that which does not serve us anymore. And I know that definitely came up with I think it was Rob when you were talking earlier. Suffering lies in our attachment to those things that no longer benefit us. And the message, the takeaway message, it is time for you to let go of what does not serve you anymore. It is holding you back, preventing you from moving forward. Sometimes to move forward, you need to make sacrifices. In hindsight, you will see that everything happens in your life for a reason.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jennifer. I think that really beautifully encompasses exactly what we've been talking about this morning. Rob, Jill, what do you think?
Yeah, I could not agree more. The letting go bit, or the acceptance bit, for me is absolutely key there. That was wonderfully said. I enjoyed that.
Fantastic.
No, I agree absolutely. And I think sort of change often requires us to be brave enough to turn the page on the old chapter and start a new one. And sometimes we need to close the book and just start a new book.
Yeah.
No,
fantastic. I think that's thank you everyone. I mean, what's lovely, and I think Byron's story and that little Wounded Healer message from our Equine Insight cards just beautifully sums that up, really. And is that key thing that actually, if we are going to move forward, there is something of the past that we need to let go. We need to make some space for the future. So thank you very much, everybody. I think it's just been an absolutely wonderful conversation this morning. You guys were brilliant. Thank you for sharing so much with us in so little time. So that's just brilliant. Jennifer, did you want to?
No, thank you. I think I would just echo, Graham, what you've said there. It's been great to speak with Rob and Gilly and yourself this morning. And yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to stop our recording now. And we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.